So one of the interesting insights about perception and filters in the recent year has come from research on artificial intelligence and robots. So I never thought I would be interested in that, but then I found that there was some very interesting realization that occurred there, because when you build a robot that's supposed to function like a human, you discover that certain aspects of what humans do that are relatively easy are very difficult for robots to do. That helps you understand what are those aspects that we have. So this is an example of the latest robot competition that happened. I think it was at MIT, but it's the DARPA Robotic Challenge. So, you know, you might have all seen those science fiction movies with robots that function like humanoids, right? This is, you know, we're very, very far from that. We're very far from that. This is the reality of robots and artificial intelligence. Oops. I guess. There we go. So this is the reality of like robots today. So simple things like walking around, opening a door, things that babies mastered pretty early. Robots, you know, cannot master that. So, but one of the key things that we have found at robots that is very hard for robots to do is how to draw a boundary around a perception or an object. Right, so take the example of this scene. You have, what do you have in this scene? What do you see? Like from a purely descriptive point of view, no interpretation. It's not a trick. Right, so you see a person, like a man, right? You see a cocktail, what looks like a cocktail in a glass, right? You see a table, you know, and you see maybe like the ledge of a chair and a window, right? Those are pretty simple things for us to see, right? Well, for robots, it's very hard to determine where whether the glass ends and the table begins, whether the chair, whether the man is part of the table or not, or whether the glass is part of the table or not. So we have to make simple chunking decisions between the glass when we perceive something. And you know, it's so obvious, it's so unconscious, it happens so fast that we don't even think about it. We're just like, well, yeah, of course, you know, like how would you not recognize that this is a door, a handle, you know, this is the floor. But that's something that's very hard for robots to do. So the ability to chunk reality into meaningful wholes or gestalt is a key aspect of understanding filters, how we filter reality, how we make sense of it. So one author describes the phenomenon as we chunk reality. Perception is an act of chunking reality into meaningful functional gestalts. So again, we think that perception is passive. Like in a traditional sense, we're like, I see reality as it is. Right? Reality manifests itself and has a meaning by itself, and I discover it. Artificial intelligence tells us not really so. You know, reality doesn't have a meaning per se. When we apply the filter of our perception, we let emerge only certain objects that are meaningful. So again, you know, when I ask you, like, why do we say there's a glass and this is a table? Why don't we talk about the line in this table there, or you know, the ledge here? Why do we decide that this should not be a thing that we should describe? You know, and restrict our description to there's a table, right? There's a glass there, right? You know, we could be more detailed and say there's a straw. You know, it looks like maybe there's an ice cube in there. You know, it looks like the liquid might be whiskey or something like that, a cocktail. You know, but you know, we decide to stop. You know, we could say there's a T-shirt there or a polo shirt. You know, but in general, we only focus on a few meaningful things, and we assign a limit to them. And when you look at how we do that, mostly we put boundaries around things that have a function for our survival. So this is related to evolutionary psychology. And the allegory is that we tend to see things as tools. So, why do we perceive a chair as an object that is meaningful? Is because it has a clear function, which is to sit in. Right? A table has a clear function to put things on. When you sit in a chair that are available at hand, things like to write, type, or eat, right? Now, when you have natural objects like a banana, like a fruit, for example, gets a little more murky. Now, a banana, it's pretty obvious that it's something you can eat. So it's related to survival by eating. But what about things like rocks, like grass, So there are stuff out there that don't have a clear purpose, a clear meaning, unless it's a lawn, where it's like a man-made object where oh yeah, a lawn is there to look pretty and maybe you can lay down on it and hang out there. It's a space for you to, be in a civilized aspect of nature. But in general, we tend to, so that's how we establish boundaries. What's the function of something? And then that becomes a thing. Now, if you look again at how children develop, you will see that very clearly. Early on, children learn to, when they learn to perceive things, the way they delimit their perception is what's the meaning of it for my survival. Now, how does your survival manifest? Mainly as in terms of pleasure and displeasure. So we talked about threats and opportunities earlier, right? A threat tends to manifest with an unpleasant feeling to it, like fear, those kind of emotions. Anger, negative emotions tend to indicate the presence of a threat. Positive emotions, pleasure, excitement, happiness, tend to signify the presence of an opportunity. Right? So when you feel positive feelings with respect to a particular object, you infer that, oh yeah, that's, and you might realize, you might discriminate different feelings and realize that it has a positive purpose for your survival, and then you recognize it as an object that fulfills a particular desire of yours. The key example is for a baby, one of the first things they need is milk, right? So if you have a breastfeeding mother, the breast is recognized as an object of fulfilling the desire for eating, right? And comfort. Or if it's a bottle, they have the same relationship with a bottle, right? And then they start to discriminate. So what are the key needs at first of a baby, right? They need to be fed, they need to be changed when they went to the bathroom, and they need to sleep when they are tired, right? So, and other things like, if it's too hot or too cold, they need to, you need to adjust what they're wearing or the temperature to accommodate for that. So those are some basic needs. As we develop, so we've all been there, we don't remember it, but as we grow more refined, we start to recognize in the world other kinds of needs and other kinds of objects that can fulfill those needs. Right now, my son is very attached to the iPad because the iPad, is a source of entertainment. So much so that we're like, well, we're going to remove it a little bit because he's always there on it. But so there's different kind of, the iPad has a function which is to provide him with his movies, and that provides him enjoyment. So that's the function of the iPad, right? Those are cultural. You will see that we are much more likely to recognize manufactured objects as meaningful than natural objects, because manufactured objects are always manufactured with a purpose in mind, with a function in mind. So that it makes it very clear that they're designed for humans to use. So we recognize this very clearly.